Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be talking about some books that you can read for the Horror in 24 Readathon. Horror in 24 is almost here. I'm so excited. It's just a few days away and I have lots of recommendations for you guys, so let's just get into it. So like I said in my announcement video, you don't necessarily have to read all horror for the Readathon. If you want to throw in some mystery thrillers or whatnot, I say go for it. They'll totally work for a lot of these prompts. So I'm going to be giving you some horror recommendations and then also just some mystery thrillers if you want to throw those in there as well. So the first prompt is to read a book with red on the cover. Most horror books have red on the cover, so you'd be pretty safe with this one to pick almost anything. Ones I'm specifically going to be talking about today that have red on the cover are Nosferatu by Joe Hill. There's even like certain editions of Pet Sematary that have red on the cover. There's Hell House by Richard Matheson. There's The Devil Crept In by Anya Alborn. There is Sour Candy by Keelan Patrick Burke. Both of those authors are just amazing authors. I love their works. Devil Crept In, I gave it 5 stars. Like one of my favorite horror books of all time, so you can't really go wrong there. If you want to pick up a graphic novel for this prompt, you could read Lock and Key by Joe Hill. I believe volume 1 is like red on the cover and stuff, so that would work for this prompt. And the same really goes for mystery thrillers as well. You just read a horror book or a mystery thriller with red on the cover. The next prompt is to read a haunted house or ghost story. Now my absolute favorite one that sticks out to me above all is The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson, but if that's one that you've already read, there are lots of great options for haunted house stories. I know that Crystal had recommended some Darcy Coates, which isn't an author that I have read from before, but I do know that all of her books are haunted house books, so that would be perfect. You could also read Hell House, like I mentioned before. That's about a haunted house, like a paranormal type deal. I believe Heart Shaped Box is about like a haunted suit, so there's that. I also have, if you really want to get crazy with it, you could read House of Leaves by Mark Danielewski. I love this one. It's a little wild. I would probably characterize it as psychological horror too, so this would double up if you wanted to double up because it's quite long. It takes a while to get through, but if you want to commit, you could try this one. You could also read The Winter People by Jennifer McMahon. I absolutely loved that one. You could read Ghost Story by Peter Staub. You could read Horror Store by Grady Hendrix. I loved that one. That's like about a haunted IKEA, but I think it totally works for the prompt. If you want to do like a mystery thriller, I loved The Broken Girls by Simone St. James. That one is just amazing and it's got those like paranormal aspects. It's also kind of a historical fiction, so if you're into historical fiction and you haven't read that one yet, that one's fantastic. You could read Home Before Dark by Riley Sager, just like I'm going to be reading. Or if you're into like young adult horror, there's Rules for Vanishing. I know this involves like a ghost or something like that and the woods, and I don't know, it sounds altogether creepy and it's totally on my wish list to get to eventually. It just sounds really freaking awesome. The next one is to read a book with supernatural creatures. You could end up picking up Salem's Lot, like I'm going to be reading. If you've already read that but you're really into like vampire books, you could do the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. I love this one. You could read Nosferatu. That would work. That would also work with red on the cover. If you want to double up with challenges, because I know this book is pretty big, something a little different. Bird Box kind of has like a supernatural creature vibe, and it would also work for psychological horror. So if you wanted to double up on that one as well, you could read this one. I loved that one. Then you could throw in like a YA like fantasy type deal. I know this isn't technically horror, but it does involve people rising back up from the dead, so like, I mean, I would say it counts. I know that Dead Nation involves like zombies during the Civil War. That one sounds really interesting. That's another like YA one. You could do The Dark Descent of Elizabeth Frankenstein. That's kind of like YA horror. You could read Frankenstein. That's one I haven't read yet that I would definitely love to get to at some point. You could also read It by Stephen King, which has red on the cover. It would totally like double up, but I know it's quite long, so I get it. If you don't want to read it during a readathon, I wouldn't either. So the next prompt is to read a gothic horror. And for this one, I'm definitely going to suggest like one of my favorite gothic horror novels, which is Perfume by Patrick Suskind. I freaking love this one so much. You could also read Dracula. Dracula's fantastic. It is my favorite classic horror novel. You could pick up something like The Witching Hour by Anne Rice, which I've had on my shelf forever and ever and ever, and I probably will never read it. But if you're interested in some gothic horror of the witchy fashion, you could totally try this out. Even The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman has these like gothic vibes, and I mean, it's not technically horror, but I mean, if you want to participate and you want to throw this in, you totally could. Mexican Gothic is a great pick for this prompt, and that's a new release that just sounds really freaking good, and it's probably what I would have picked had I not already bought the book that I'm going to be reading for this. If you want to pick up a graphic novel, you could even do Through the Woods by Emily Carroll. Definitely has some gothic themes in that one, and it's perfect for readathon because you can read it in like one sitting, so that would be great for this as well. The next prompt is read a favorite childhood spooky story. This one's pretty easy. You could read Goosebumps. If you read like Fear Street by R.L. Stine, you could read some Christopher Pike. You could also read like Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. I know a lot of people read that as a kid. And if you didn't really read horror as a kid, just pick a random one out. Like, pick something that just appeals to you. I know Marcy said that she didn't really read horror as a kid, so she just like bought a bunch of Goosebump books and that's what she's gonna read, so you could totally do that. Next is to read a psychological horror. So for this one, you could read Head Full of Ghosts is great by Paul Tremblay. That one's a great like exorcism horror book. I know The Shining is like a psychological horror. Bird Box works great for this prompt. You could read Silence of the Lambs by Thomas Harris if you like the serial killery stuff, which I love. You could even do House of Leaves for this prompt as well. It's definitely like psychological, like really fuck your head up type shit, so that would work. The Haunting of Hill House, like I mentioned before, by Shirley Jackson, which is one of my favorites, also definitely qualifies as psychological horror. You could read, I've heard great things about Beloved by Toni Morrison. That's definitely one that's on my TBR I want to get around to. You also couldn't go wrong with picking up any of my favorite mystery thrillers, which are psychological thrillers. You could read Night Film by Marisha Pessl. You could read Behind Closed Doors by B.A. Paris. This is a great psychological thriller, like domestic thriller. If you like that, you'll like this one. You could read My Lovely Wife by Samantha Downing, another great psychological thriller that will keep you on the edge of your seat. You could also read The Silent Patient by Alex Michael Lyde. Psychological thrillers, I mean, they're just all over the place, so you could pick up a lot of different stuff for this one. And the next prompt is to read any horror book that's on your TBR or has been on your TBR for a while. This works for anything your heart desires. If you're not sure where to start and you're really just starting out with horror, you don't know what authors to read, I would definitely recommend looking into Tananarive Due. Since we're all trying to read more books by Black authors, that would be a great place to start. You could also read anything by Anya Alborn. She is a fantastic, underrated horror author. There is Keelan Patrick Burke, who is also very personable and just a wonderful horror author as well. He writes just some really creepy stuff. You could even start with Grady Hendrix, who does more like horror with that like comical relief, if that's something you're looking for. Lots of great places to start. You can always come to me and ask me for suggestions. I will give you the best suggestions I can, and as well as like the other hosts, they're all horror readers, so you could ask Crystal, you could ask Marcy or Carol. We are all here for you if you are looking for recommendations of horror to start with. That's all I have for my recommendations. I hope that you guys liked this video. I hope that you liked the recommendations or got something out of it today. Let me know down below if you're going to be reading any of these books, if you read any of these books, what you thought of them. please just say something, say hi, whatever, it doesn't matter. Leave me an emoji, I don't care. Just let me know that you watched and you enjoyed. I will probably be offline for a few days because I'm going camping, but I will be vlogging for the Horror in 24 readathon while I'm gone. So just know that when I get back, I'll be all about it. I'll be letting you guys know on Instagram what I'm going to be reading. So stay tuned for that. Make sure you're following me and all the hosts. Please subscribe if you want more videos from me. And thank you guys so much for watching. Goodbye.